Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers Reviews morning briefing on Monday, the 16th of October. I'm joined by Chris, Jack, and Stevie Clifford. We've got a new manager to discuss for the third autumn in a row. We've done a little bit of that yesterday. But Philippe Clement obviously spoke to Rangers TV for the first time yesterday evening. We've got loads and loads of content on the website looking at who he is as a person, as a manager, a little bit of detail inside his appointment as well. So no shortage of talking points this morning. Chris, I'll come to you first. In terms of weekends, that must be right up there with how busy that one was.
I've had quite a few of these over the years, unfortunately, because Rangers are making a bit of a habit of hiring and firing managers. If they could pick one and stick with it, and that would be smashing. If they could pick one that's going to be successful, that would be even better. It was a busy weekend after a busy couple of weeks, but I think the content that we've had over the last couple of weeks has been excellent. Hopefully, everyone's enjoyed the videos. Hopefully, everyone's enjoyed the interviews and the big reads and some of the news we've been able to break over the last couple of weeks. So I think we've done our bit. Now over to you, Phil Clement.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stevie, first, I guess, what do you think? We've not spoken to you since Phil Clement came in. As mentioned, the third appointment in 3 autumns, and we'll get right into it. But this is a big one that Rangers need to get right. What do you make of the kind of day yesterday and that first interview?
Well, they always have to get the managerial appointment right, but there is a degree of probably more pressure on this one, considering where we've been. Rangers have to get this right, otherwise you're into a territory that you're normalising a territory now that you really don't want to be in, as in, every year changing their manager, and that can't be the situation for us. So, what did I think of it? Well, I'm intrigued. I think that's the right way to put it, Joshua, because I'm not sure that I know entirely a lot about him. Over the last week, I've delved into a wee bit of his career and done a lot more kind of research and read up and listened to the kind of Belgian press experts that have been on various kind of websites and stuff like that, including our own. The interview with Derek last week was pretty good. We spoke about that last week. So there's been a few things that I've looked at and kind of read up on, and I think do you know what? I think the overwhelming thing for me is whoever was going to take this job, Joshua, I just want to be entertained. I want to see a level of football that we can all get behind, and I don't expect that immediately. He's obviously got a really difficult kind of task in front of him with picking the squad up and making sure that Rangers do immediately get results. There's a League Cup to be won, and we need to start getting a style and kind of see something that we can all gravitate towards. So he has kind of instant pressure and instant in a short-term success that he'll aim for. But in terms of appointments, him or Kevin Muscat, who it inevitably came down to in the last week or so, there was going to be pros and cons for any of them. But having read up on it, he seems to play a style of football that we like. He scores a lot of goals. He's kind of, a wee bit more methodical, perhaps, than Kevin Muscat might have been. In terms of his approach, it isn't as all-out attacking, but there is something that he likes to play there. He spoke about it himself. He likes to be on a forward foot. He likes to press and stuff like that. So, listen, it's just, see, for me, genuinely intrigued is where I am. It's going to be a really interesting appointment. I think on the face of it, at this point, early October, who are you really going to get? Who's really going to be available? And I think he's probably one of the best candidates out there that we could have got. So it's an interesting one, but there's a lot of pressure on this appointment, especially for the board, to make sure that this is the right one. So it really is. It's an intriguing one. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to it, Joshua. Let's get behind him. He's here. Mm-hmm. So I think there's less excitement for me than there has been the last couple of ones. I think that's maybe because I've tempered that myself. But there's certainly the same level of expectation amongst the fan base. There always will be. Rangers have got to win, and he's got to be the man that delivers it.
Yeah, well, let's get into his first interview. We're going to obviously bring up a lot of comments, loads and loads to talk about. We're going to speak about a bit more about the appointment. Obviously, Chris, you had the story last night, a little bit of information about the backroom staff as well, which we'll get into. First and foremost, Chris, I want to ask you what stood out from the interview. These things, when I guess it's club channels, they're never going to kind of be too revolutionary, but there's some, I guess, some interesting details about how he's going to approach things. You can kind of pick up the manner of how an individual speaks. My favourite line was him calling himself a football animal, and saying that he's watched all the Rangers games in the last 2 days. And as the joke went on social media, if that's not going to put you off, then fair play. But I guess there is a serious note to that, Chris. This is someone who he's just been sacked by Monaco at the end of last season, yes, but before that, one of, I think it's fair to say, one of Europe's most exciting young coaches, someone who seemed set to go upwards in his career. And as much as Rangers have picked Clement, he's obviously really wants to be here. And as Stevie says, he's picking this job at a difficult time. What stood out to you throughout that first interview with Rangers TV?
I think it's probably a couple of things towards the end of it. And he was asked about still having the chance to come in, and there's silverware on the table, there's things to go for. He spoke a bit about having 4 chances to win things. Maybe a wee bit optimistic. I think we can say it's maybe 3. It's maybe even only 2, unfortunately. But I think he's clearly that track record of winning, that track record of building successful teams has been one of the key things that have attracted Rangers to Clement. If he hadn't have won anything in his career, he'd have been nowhere near this job. And the Rangers had to have someone who has that ability to build winning teams and to not just win one title, to go and win multiple titles, because that's what Rangers have to get back to. He spoke about it's a marathon, not a sprint, and I think it will take time for his style of play to really feed into the squad. I think it's important that the fans see early on what he's trying to do with the team. Obviously, a lot of injuries still at present. It depends what's going to be available to him for the Hibs game. And I don't think it's going to be a case of rip it up, start again. But he did kind of address that playing style, talking about being creative, scoring goals, being dominant. And that's music to the ears of the Rangers fans, because we all know there's been times, certainly under Gio, certainly under Michael Beale, the style has just not been there. It's been too slow. It's been too lackadaisical. They've not had that cutting edge. And while there's still doubts over the side defensively, when you don't have that cutting edge, you always leave yourself open to losing silly goals and dropping silly points. So I think the fans will be encouraged by the fact that he's talking about having this dominant style and getting the ball forward and playing quickly and scoring goals. Ultimately, time will tell. He's obviously never managed in Scottish football before. He's got experience going to Pittodrie, Easter Road, Tynecastle. He's got the plastic pitches at Killie, and also Livy to look forward to as well. So just because a style has worked in Belgium doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work here. But I think he's got the foundations. He's got the fundamentals of knowing what it takes to be a successful manager. I think that was one of the key things that came out in his interview, certainly in the recruitment process. And I think when he's now already talking about being on the front foot and being dominant, the fans will expect to see that. So hopefully we can see signs of that first game on Saturday, having had a couple of days to work with the team. And we're then going into a really hectic schedule of European games, Cup games, Premiership games. All these ones have to be won, much like it was for Michael Beale. Now, we said all these games had to be won heading into the Parkhead game at the end of the year, and that's the same for Philippe Clement now. So interesting to see what impact he can make, and hopefully he can live up to the early billing.
Yeah, Stevie, I mean, Dean here saying that morning, do you think Clement will get a tune out of these players? Personally, I think Beale's tactics made them look worse than they are. I mean, we spoke a lot about style of play over the last, couple of weeks, and there's lots of reasons why maybe that's important. People will say that only winning matters, and that is true. But it helps if you've got something entertaining to watch. But I think more importantly than that, it helps if people can see what they're buying into, and they can see, okay, I can see how this is building. I can see why this will be successful, and that helps you if you are going to have a bump in the road to get that long-term buy-in. So, I mean, as Chris says, there's not loads of time to implement a style of play or change lots of things. I think Clement is going to be someone who comes in and adapts somewhat to the players that he has available. But I mean, what do you think over the next few games beyond winning? What do you think Clement needs to show the fan base? Is it really attacking football? Is it just results? How do you think he needs to strike that balance?
Well, what I would say, first of all, from the interview, Joshua, I was quite pleased that he's sat and watched all the games this season, because that will give him a real kind of insight into how we feel as well as a fan base. And quite personally, if we've had to suffer it, I'm quite glad that he's had to have a look at it also. You know, he was watching that Motherwell home game on the plane. That was a clip, and that's probably the best place to start, because that really was a bit of a
It was bad. It was very bad.
How can I say this? It was like the perfect way to summarise what we've seen this season. I think that's perfectly fair. And I think what I would look for immediately, and what I think is really difficult, because I'm not sure we've got the players, but you want them to set a tempo, and that's what I'm looking for. Because I've often said, and I've long since said that we'd be sitting here, everything's so slow, the build-up's so slow, the decision making so slow, 5 touches from side to side when one will really do. I want to see that kind of passionate attacking football that's quick. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly he can do that from back to front. He said that we like to score goals but not give away cheap ones. Well, our whole season's been littered with cheap goals given away. I'm not sure there's one that's conceded, Joshua, where we haven't had a direct hand in it. So that's the immediate challenge for him, to get that balance right. How does he do that? He's got a wee bit of time to kind of have a look at this squad as well and decide who's good enough and who's not. But the biggest thing for me, Joshua, see, talking about Michael Beale's tactics, right? The biggest thing for me is that he figures out quickly how much of that was actually down to the tactics. Was the manager suffocating this team? Was he not getting his message across properly? Were the players just not capable of performing, and have some of them ran the race at Rangers? These are the really big questions that are not only in my mind, but I think also at the forefront of the fan supporters' minds as well. Is James Tavernier going through a bad patch, or is he past his best stages for Rangers? Is Connor Goldson the same? Does Borna Barisic and John Lundstrom really deserve a new contract? Is Ryan Jack got the capabilities of doing another season? These are all big questions that are at the forefront. And the problem is for these players is that they're now on manager 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. And every single time we've saw a resurgence from these guys, and then the same old things happen 6 months down the line. So these are the biggest things that Philippe Clement needs to sort in the short term over this squad, and then in the medium to long term when he decides where we're really going. Now, in answer to that question, how much is down to Beale, we'll find that out very quickly if these players suddenly get an upturn. But it's not really the immediate upturn I'm worried about, Joshua, and maybe Chris as well, that it's more in 6 months' time, because history's told us that the exact same things will happen when the going really gets tough with this group. So these are the big things that I'm worried about and that he needs to address. He can't do that immediately, so what we're looking for is maybe a style, tempo, pressing. Can he get that? How quickly is that, foreseeable to see that? How realistic is it to see immediate results in that kind of thing? So these are the immediate kind of things I'm looking for, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly he can get his identity onto the pitch. Longer term with this squad, with the more established players, those are the big questions for me.
Yeah, and I guess you're right, Steve. This is, if Clement comes in and wins games, then that will make everyone feel better, and that it's a great way to lift the mood at a football club. But there is wider questions about how Rangers are here for the third time in 3 seasons, about a number of players in the squad, absolutely, and the start to the season. Chris, I'm going to get into the assistant, the conversation about a coach coming in. And we already know that Clement's brought one assistant over. But before we touch on that, from people I've spoke to about him, and we've got 2 pieces on the website today which should keep you occupied. One, Chris's piece looking at details inside the appointment, details about Souness's involvement, how Clement impressed, why he impressed. And I've done a piece where I've spoken to a number of people that have worked with Clement to give a bit of insight into what he's like as a man, as a manager, how he's worked his way up from a successful playing career to have this managerial career as well. I mean, just firstly, before we get into the talk of his backroom stuff, Chris, what have you found out about Philippe Clement, the person? Why Rangers think he's the right man to take over now? Because, as Stevie says, this is quite delicately poised. You've got the potential of winning the League Cup, which would be a real catalyst and an opportunity that no Rangers managers had kind of that opportunity without Celtic in the competition for I guess a number of years. You've got the opportunity to go and build consistency ahead of that Old Firm game, but equally you're in a position where 7 points behind. If you don't start well, it could be a very long season and it could be an uphill battle. So why do Rangers think that Philippe Clement's the right person now, and what have you found out about him over the kind of course of the weekend and the past week?
As I mentioned earlier on, Josh, I think that track record of winning is something that certainly attracted them to him. I think one of the key aspects, if you look at the titles that he has won, I know that something a big part of it was that second title that he won at Bruges. So it's not a case of he goes in, he takes over a good team and wins the league. And I think that feeds into a problem that Rangers actually had after 55 of, do the squad have it in them to go again? Do they see a league title as they've reached the top of the mountain and they don't want to climb another one? Or do they have that ability to go again and be sustained and be serial winners? Now, as recent history has shown, that's not the case for this Rangers squad. Now, they've won one Scottish Cup since then. So I think that was a big thing for Rangers in terms of they've got somebody who can motivate a squad to not just win one and to have a great achievement, but to go again. Obviously, having been sacked at Monaco, I've said before, I'm not going to hold that against them too much because managers get sacked in the game these days. It's not a disaster. And I think if we can see in the next few weeks and few months that he's bounced back from that he's learned from that, then that could go down as one of the defining aspects of his career. And having that setback could actually be one of the makings of him. As outlined in that piece, and it's also been clear for the last week or so, it did come down to Clement against Kevin Muscat. I know there's a lot went into the whole interview process. I think also Rangers were down in London, for a number of days, interviewed a handful of candidates. I think very quickly narrowed it down to these two, and it became evident that it was going to be these two. As also other names also reported that Frank Lampard was not in the running. Like Scott Parker has been put forward. Billy Davies was also linked. Ryan Lowe was linked. Loads of names as you would expect, but none of them actually serious ones. So I think Rangers have always had Clement on their list. They've had this short list of potential managers, even while Michael Beale was still there, because he could have been a success. He could have been poached by another club, or as has happened, obviously, could have been a failure and they had to move on. So I think that they've always had these type of names in mind, and I think having the international break, it did just buy them enough time to go through the interview process in London, and for then other members of the board and other investors also to then have a part in that process. So I think Clement has stood out alongside Muscat. Ultimately, it's Clement that they've decided to go for. So time will tell if that's been the right choice or not. But I don't think you can accuse Rangers of fudging the process or rushing it. I think they've taken their time over it. They've done as much research and background checks, looking at everything as they possibly can do. Hopefully, it all pays off, because as we've said this morning, as we've said for a number of days now, this one has to be the right one. So hopefully, they're talking about Clement being a winner and commanding respect in the dressing room and having this style of play that the fans are going to enjoy watching. Talking about having this presence and aura, and that's something that's come across in the pieces that you've done as well. So hopefully all these things are actually true. Hopefully we start to see these things on the pitch soon. So I hope hopefully we've now got to the end of this process. Now the really important bit begins.
Yeah, absolutely. Should take this opportunity to remind you of two things, folks. Firstly, great time to subscribe. My piece from today, Chris's piece from today, both in the description. You're also going to have, I believe, 2 Stevie Clifford pieces over the course of the week. So if that's not reason to subscribe, what is? But loads and loads of content over on the YouTube members page as well. We're going to be looking over the course of the week at more detail into how Philippe Clement might set up. We've already got pieces on there, as mentioned, inside his managerial appointment. Loads and loads of detailed reporting from Chris. We've spoken to people who have worked with him to give a bit of a profile of what Clement is actually like. So do go over and subscribe if you've not. And should mention as well that this morning briefing is brought to you by our partners, MPH Group, Scotland's awards-winning family-run all-trades specialists covering all of mainland Scotland. And as Derek has been telling you all week, very professionally last week, every service you opt for automatically enters you into MPH's incredible holiday giveaway. You could win a 7-night stay at the luxurious Moon Palace Resort in Cancun, Mexico. So if that's not an incentive to go and work with our partners over at MPH Group, then what is? You can get all those links in the description. Chris, I'm going to come back to you before I go back to Stevie Maka here saying, morning guys, given my optimism over Gio and Beale, not sure how I feel about this appointment, hope it works. It has to. Chris, any information on which player will be part of his staff? This is obviously in relation to the piece you had out last night, Chris, which touched on some more details on who will be in Philippe Clement's backroom staff. He's only at time of talking brought one assistant over with him from Belgium. You had the story last night, Chris, that as well as that, they look to appoint someone with an affinity to the club, to Clement's backroom staff. Can you just, I guess, bring us up to speed a little bit on this and provide some insight as to what's happening there?
Well, the club statement also said yesterday that the new staff would be put in place. Coach Stefan van der Heyden, he joined Clement on the flight over. I think he's put it on social media, a picture of him on Craig Robertson signing his contract. So that one is obviously done. So he will be part of the staff. Understand that Colin Stewart will remain as a goalkeeping coach as part of the team as well. I think, interestingly, a couple of guys that he's worked with at previous clubs at Bruges and Monaco, Jonas Ivens and Johan van Roomst, they will not be joining him as far as we understand. And I know there's a lot of talk about Thomas Buffel perhaps being part of that New Look squad or New Look staff as well. Again, we understand that he's not the former player that's lined up. Rangers, I think, will look to go down the road of bringing someone in who has a knowledge of Scottish football and who has an affinity with the club. We've also been down this road before with previous managers, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk about how valuable it actually is. Personally, I don't think it's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. That we do really see when conversations like this come up, it's the same handful of names that come up all the time. Everybody wants Graham Souness. Most people want Barry Ferguson, Kevin Thompson, or Neil McCann. Some people want Alec Gray, and it'll be interesting to see what they actually do. I know we spoke last week about the club potentially retaining Steve Davis if he decides that he can't continue playing after his knee injury. Unfortunately, if that is the case, I would like to see Stephen involved in the staff at Auchenhowie somewhere. That doesn't necessarily mean that he goes in and becomes assistant manager, but I think Steve Davis could be a Rangers manager in the future. Mm-hmm. So having him around, whether it's coaching as number 3 coach at first team level, whether it's involved in the 20s or further down, I would personally like to see Stephen involved in some way. And there will be a number of names. You're also going through the comments there, Josh. A number of names will come up. It'll be interesting to see how Rangers go through that process. But it is something that I know they are looking at. It's something they discussed with Clement during the process. He's happy with it. Club are happy with it, and it's now just trying to find that ideal candidate. I don't think it has to be in place right now. It's not a disaster if that man's not at the training ground this afternoon, or if he doesn't get involved in the session tomorrow. It's a longer term thing. But so Rangers are working on that process, and hopefully we'll certainly do our best to endeavour to find out first and foremost who it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Stevie, Colin Cameron saying, good morning. I think Phil was the right choice. He has Champions League experience too, which is maybe an important point we should come on to, so he won't be out of his depth. Hopefully Todd is back soon. What role do you think Phil will play him in? Colin's comment takes us nicely onto the news as well. Todd Cantwell, and I think it was a Beautiful Game podcast, which has a lot of really interesting interviews, released a snippet of their interview with Todd Cantwell, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is out today. And he was hinting that he might be back fit for the Hibs game. Stevie, no one needs to, I don't need to tell or reiterate how good a player Todd Cantwell is. I think the likes of him and Raskin, we need to see them in set positions and kind of doing it over the course of a season and having consistency in the starting 11. But looking at Cantwell under Clement, and I guess more widely, how do you think he could set up? Obviously, we need to find out who's going to be back available, who's going to be fit. But if he is, do you think it's a positive that the noise we keep hearing about Clement is he's going to play a system that suits his players? He's not wedded to something specifically. I think that could, certainly in the short term, I guess long term is a different conversation, but short term, I think that's probably beneficial when you've not got, well, he's got a week to work with the players, but a lot of them will be injured at the moment, or a good chunk of them. Do you think that's a positive in the short term, that he's going to look at all these players and think, instead of, I'm going to fit you into what I want to do, I'm going to do something that's going to get the best out of the players that are here already?
So ultimately, it'll be decided on whether it works or not, Joshua. And you look at Michael Beale's tenure when he first came in, and even Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, who I think, correct me if I'm wrong, went sort of 7 on the bounce, and that's where the famous kind of get the zero thing came in for
Keep
Van
the zero.
Bronckhorst. Keep the zero, and then obviously Michael Beale had the same. So it's not, winning hasn't been enough for these guys. You need to show something. And it's all right saying that we're going to, kind of mold a system, or he's going to play it around these players, but these players aren't good enough. So we've already seen that over not only one manager, but a course of them. I'd like to see him, on a wider basis, I'd like to see him kind of try and mold the squad around the guys that we think we can have a future for. So I'm talking about the likes of Cantwell, obviously, Nico Raskin, Yilmaz, could he become what we think he might be? John Souttar, the defence. Could we get something out of Sterling? Seema's only here for a year, but he obviously has shown a wee bit finishing-wise. The rest of his game we're not too sure about. Could Ravi Matondo continue his kind of redemption curve the way we hope he can? These are the ones that I would like to see him try and get something out of. Is Kieran Dowell capable of staying fit for more than 5 minutes, and can we get something out of him? This is the sort of questions I would like to see answered, more on a larger scale, and maybe something that's attracted the board as well. You've got the big acquisitions in the summer. Danilo has shown a wee bit. We're all kind of hopeful that he might be a player. He scored a few goals and with his head and stuff. So can he find a way to maximise the likes of him? Can you get anything out of Sam Lammers or Cyril Dessers? We'll find out. That's his remit immediately for me. So when you talk about fitting a style round, was Dessers so bad because he's getting played in a position that just doesn't, or a role, not a position, a role that doesn't suit him? Because I look at him and look at what we're trying to do, make him this pressing, galvanising forward. And I always thought, and still do think, that he just isn't that type of player. If we're going to get anything out of Dessers, he's probably going to have to be played as a target man style poacher, up and around the box only, and see where it takes us, Joshua. And maybe finding that person to play off him. Maybe it is Danilo that needs to play off him, up there with him. So that's the kind of thing. We talk about the interview with Clement and what we took out of it. I'm really interested to see his style and what he's going to do. A few people have said that he's not adverse to 4-4-2. I think that could be really interesting. He can mix it up, play 4-2-3-1, which is just basically a glorified version of 4-4-2, slightly kind of modified. Will he go in and identify that we need wingers immediately, and that means we'll go back into the market? There's a few exciting things to kind of think about. But he talked about where he's going to play, or the question was, where do you play Todd Cantwell to get the best out of him? Todd Cantwell's best form for Rangers has been as a 10. His best performances for Rangers up against Callum McGregor and stuff was as a 10, sitting right on him. And that's another thing we spoke about, which confused me about Michael Beale. Michael Beale found something that worked. He found somebody that he could build everything around. Todd Cantwell being in that position. He flourished. He was the shining light in the close of the season last year. He got a lot of people excited, and then he ripped it up and put him back in midfield in a position that clearly didn't suit him. So can he build something that suits Todd Cantwell, Nico Raskin, Jose Cifuentes? That's the kind of position we need to be in. And we'll figure out very soon if, it was down to coaching. But it's interesting. If you watch the games, and he said he has, I'd be really interested to talk to him and see what his impression of the St Mirren victory is, because on paper 3-0 is a cracking result there. We didn't play well, Joshua. And there was lots of times during that game where John Souttar, Connor Goldson actually stopped on the ball, stopped dead, and were looking forward, and there was no movement and things like that. I'm interested to see how he's going to fix that and what he's going to do to fix that quickly. So yeah, I'm enthusiastic by what he says about the style and suiting it to suit our players, because I do think we've got a handful of good players in there that we can build and base around. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. How does he maximise that when the other managers have failed to do so in the last couple of years for the older squad and for the new guys, the ones that did get a lot of faith put in them in the summer? Are they capable of really performing? That's the interesting bit for me. So, I'm intrigued to see how he's going to handle this and what he's going to do.
Chris Sky Larker here getting in touch to talk about Clement's presence. It'll be important when he first comes in. He has to take control of a difficult situation and create a positive vision for the season. Quickly, listen, Stevie's right. There's wider questions about how radical Clement needs to be in the transfer window. Who's got the actual lead in the transfer window? The conversation of a director of football. All these things, I think, will and should come up. But I think in isolation, he needs to just come in and stabilise things by winning a few games. He's got home games. As mentioned, he's got the opportunity to win the League Cup. Still a good opportunity to qualify from that Europa League group. And it was important. I think Rangers wanted to get someone in today to meet the squad today to have that weekend. And that's important because ahead of Hibs at home at the weekend, which won't be an easy game, that's going to be a really important introduction, isn't it? Because this isn't an easy situation to inherit mid-season. And I guess, I don't know if you agree, but before we think about the long term, before we start to talk about all these decisions which are so important, he just needs to win a few games of football, and that will start to calm things down and get some fans on side, I guess.
Ultimately, that's always the most important thing for any Rangers manager. That's how any Rangers manager is judged. If you look like you're going to win trophies and you do win trophies, you're a success. If you don't win trophies and you don't look like you're going to win trophies, then you get the sack, because the standards of the club, that's just how it is. You either win or you're out the door. Also, that's not going to be a short-term concern for Phil Clement. He's obviously here for the longer term. That's the ambition for the club. But he has to get off to a good start. He's inherited a situation where the first time he drops points in the Premiership, it probably cost Rangers the title. The 7 points as it stands, you can maybe get it back. There's 3 Old Firm games. Celtic look like they might drop points along the road. But the problem is Rangers have never looked like putting together the kind of run to then actually put any pressure on them. They've never looked like going and winning 12 games on the spin. If they can go and win 2 or 3 on the spin, but they've been doing well at times this season. So he has kind of a really difficult time. If the gap had been 3 or 4 points, there's maybe a wee bit of wiggle room, but there's just none now. The way that he's the time that he's come in, that defeat to Aberdeen, it's really put him on the back foot in terms of the Premiership. Europa League wise, as bad as Cyprus was, Rangers should still qualify. If he can go away to Prague next week and get a good result, it puts Rangers in a good position in the group and will really get people on board. The League Cup is non-negotiable. Now, there's no excuse for not winning that. There's the Hearts coming up at Hampden in a couple of weeks. Has to win that one. You back Rangers 9 times out of 10 to then go and win the final. And if he can do all these things, if he can put together a league run and take care of a couple of tricky games, if he can put together a couple of European results, win the League Cup, and then crucially it comes down to that Old Firm game at Parkhead. If Rangers can go into that game no worse than 7 behind and then win it, that then puts a very different slant on the second half of the season. Hopefully, by that stage, having qualified in Europe, having won the League Cup. Now, that might be the dream scenario. That might be laying out a position that's not actually realistic, but that has to be the expectation. That has to be the demand over the next few weeks, because if any of those things fall down, it then asks questions of Phil Clement and asks, as Stevie outlined earlier on, asks huge questions of this squad. So that's the opportunity that Rangers have over the next couple of weeks. They now have to make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. A comment here from Barry saying, do you know if there will be an introductory press conference when we hope to hear more from the manager and the club? I believe that is going to be tomorrow. So stay tuned about that. We'll have loads and loads of coverage from that, goes without saying. And three times in the Blue Room in the last 3 years is not for new managerial press conferences. I don't think that's something that you'll have done, Chris, or you'll have done, Stevie, because it's Not that common in history, appointing a Rangers manager, but Philippe Clement has become the 19th permanent manager of Rangers. Just finally, Stevie, I want to get your thoughts before we close about the backroom staff member. Do you think that's important to have someone with an affinity of the club, with understanding of the club? From what I understand, Philippe Clement is someone who takes a lot of training. He's very hands-on. He's not a kind of manager who, lets his assistant do all the coaching, and he kind of takes a back seat and does team talks and does other things. Clement's very hands-on the training pitch. But do you think that is going to be important? Because again, Scottish football is maybe not exceptional, but it is unique. It's a unique time to come into the club, and how do you, I guess, observe that move to get someone into Clement's backroom staff who has an affinity with Rangers?
Well, previously I would have sat here and said, I don't think it's that important at all. But I've sat here and said that, and then maybe watched the last two managers fail. But Giovanni Van Bronckhorst should have known what this club was all about. Michael Beale should have known what this club was all about. How much is it really needed is going to be defined by what happens on the pitch, Joshua. Mm-hmm. Because, if Kevin Thompson comes in, if Alex Rae comes in, if Neil McCann comes in, then, that's a great thing if we're winning. People might point to it and say, that's great, but has it really made a difference before? Nobody can accuse Ali McCoist of not knowing what the club is all about. But when he was manager, coming up, but was it really working for him? So I think that the only thing I would say about it is perhaps that when it's a foreign manager and they maybe have a Scottish kind of identity to help them, that might really help. And Stephen Davis falls into that bracket. We obviously know that Stephen Davis is from Northern Ireland, but he's steeped in Rangers traditions. He knows that, he's a lifelong supporter of the club. That's what I'm trying to say. So he understands, where we are. So I think that qualifies him more than readily for that. But, Joshua, when people were talking about signing Scottish people in the summer, people have talked about having somebody on the background. I was kind of flaky and thinking maybe that it doesn't matter that much, but we've seen those models fail substantially in the last couple of years. So maybe I have to change my kind of viewpoint slightly on that and kind of be open to that possibility. So, I think if it happens, when it happens, by all accounts, what Chris is saying, when that happens, then we can kind of embrace that when it comes along. That's certainly how I'll be looking at it. I'm as I said, I'm intrigued but open-minded on how this is all going to work. And I don't want to downplay that, because obviously I've been very excited about the last couple of appointments. It's not that I'm not excited. I think that it's just that we're sitting going, this group has done this now, 3 times in recent years. So there's a little bit of trepidation behind that.
Yeah.
But
I think Stevie, it's fair to say there's a lot of unknowns, isn't there? I mean,
there is.
He could come in, and I think there's really good credentials to him as a manager. You could say the same about the previous two, but I think you're right. There is a lot of unknowns, and I think we were talking about the third managerial appointment in 3 years around this time. It's only natural to maybe emphasise that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's all absolutely fair. When you look at Clement, just a wee bit more in depth, you look at what he done at Genk, and then you look at his 2.5 years at Club Brugge, and then he goes to Monaco. So Monaco obviously thought highly of him, and I think his goal scoring at Monaco, if my research is right, was second only to PSG, who had at the time Messi, Neymar, Mbappe, and stuff. So he's clearly somebody that likes to play on the front foot, and that's going to be his biggest challenge here. But as Chris said, in the short term, over the next 10 weeks, there's a lot that he can do and achieve instantly. Now, what Chris spoke of was maybe at this moment in time a bit of a kind of, best case scenario, which, forgive me without saying, it will be a real challenge to this squad currently, how they're playing. And that's not meaning to be negative. I'm just trying to be realism and perhaps temper the expectations somewhat, as this squad perhaps haven't shown us they're capable of that yet. But if he can somehow get that to click, and over this next 10 weeks or so, we see that, and then head into Parkhead at least on a upward trajectory where the positivity is there, I think everybody at this moment in time would grab that. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to speaking and dealing with him. I actually won't be at the press conference this week, So I'm not going to make it to the Blue Room. We are off on a wee family holiday. It's October break. And when I quizzed the missus on why she had chosen this period of time, she says, well, how was I to know? Because you told me Michael Beale was going to be great. So talk about being clamped, Joshua. So
fair enough.
She knows. So I'm looking forward to it. We will have it covered, and obviously looking forward to the coverage on here. Chris will be there, and we'll be able to get a good update and see what he's like. But I think maybe what I would like to see is in the immediate somebody with that authority, that gravitas to come in, command the room, in the dressing room, get that instant respect, and then maybe go from there. So I thought Michael Beale had that. He obviously didn't. I was hopeful for Van Bronckhorst, and I think that probably history will be kinder to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. And I think we'll probably be kinder to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst than what it suggests at the moment, in terms of European finals and things like that. But I wish him all the luck, and I hope that we get what we want. This needs to be the right appointment, Joshua, because we really cannot fall into this cycle where what happens when managers becomes a normality, because that really would be a disastrous position to be in. We need this guy to come in and stabilise. Let's get 2 or 3 really good years out of him, and then he can quite happily go down south or whatever he wants to go next. But let's concentrate on Rangers and let's see where that brings us. And hopefully, I think we can now look forward to these home games and things that are coming up with a wee bit more excitement than we had in the past. Because there is that question now. All of a sudden, it's maybe a lifeline for Sam Lammers, Cyril Dessers. Can he get these guys performing? Can he maximise their qualities? Because all it takes, let's be honest, is 1 or 2 big goals. A winner in Prague, for example, before the narrative around these guys begins to start to sway towards maybe there's something there. So it's not all lost at this moment in time, but it's fair to say that he doesn't come in with 3 lives. He comes in a situation, as Chris pointed out, where we don't have much left and we need to really go. So I suppose it's exciting for us to see how it's all going to turn out. And I'm certainly looking forward to speaking with him and seeing what he's like. And, Joshua, he does have one immediate thing going for him.
Yeah,
exactly. You know what I mean? And I think that's a real positive. So let's see how he does. I certainly wish him all the best. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I'm looking forward to seeing the coverage, obviously, on the channel with Chris being at the press conference tomorrow and things and seeing how he speaks. So I think it's an exciting time to see what we can look forward to. It's all right to be excited, isn't it? We're supporters.
Yeah.
Look forward to that. I think that's fair. But there is that kind of side of you that's maybe a wee bit more braced for what might be. So
yeah, we will see. All will be revealed, and all the games will come very quickly after Philippe Clement takes charge of his first game on Saturday against Hibs. There's the
Sorry, I was going to say, don't you think it's an irony thing? Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's first game he ever saw was Hibs at Hampden. Michael Beale's first game last year, Hibs.
Yeah, true.
And then Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's first proper game was Prague. It's funny how football kind of repeats itself, isn't it? Find yourself back here again. So I just thought that was a wee interesting thing.
It is absolutely well spotted. Finally, Aaron saying, I miss Johnny. Johnny will be back on the channel this week. Obviously, Derek is away enjoying himself, and I think he's in Vienna. So have a nice holiday, Derek. You'll be stuck with me in the hosting chair, but Johnny will be about this week as well to cover, if you can, cover Derek Clark, which of course is going to be a very difficult job for myself. But remember, loads of content on the website. Great time to subscribe. Just a reminder, we've got the offer on, the annual offer on, as you can see on the ticker below on your screen. Some great content from Chris today, a deep dive from myself, having spoken to a number of people who have worked with Philippe. Stevie is going to have 2 pieces this week, as mentioned, and that's before we start to think about the press conference, match coverage, a bit of a tactical look at how Clement could set up. So if you want to read and watch and listen to Rangers content, we've got everything that you could possibly want on the website and the YouTube channel as well. Until then, thanks to Stevie and Chris. Chris is going to go and have a well-earned break, I hope, until the press conference tomorrow. Stevie's going to have a nice holiday. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Until then, thank you very much for joining us and have a great rest of your Monday.